If you've ever thought, I'm so tired of this, tired of feeling the same way, tired of trying to change and ending up in the same place, I'm about to share why. And as we dive in, I'm going to ask you take a moment to like and subscribe the channel. It helps me get this content to more people who are looking for support. So back to the topic for today's video. I recently hosted the launch for my new book, You're Not the Problem. And what I shared that night is something I want you to hear too, because the message has the power to reconnect you with the version of you that's capable of creating what you want most for yourself. So think of this video more as a teaching moment as opposed to a quick fix. Interact with it through the questions that I'm going to present for you, and then ask questions and share your insights in the comments below. If you're open to it, I believe today's video will provide some light bulb moments for you and a way to take steps towards the change that you're seeking. So we began the launch event with the first minute or so of an incredibly powerful song called Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield. And in the song, she sings, "Drench yourself in words unspoken. Live your life with arms wide open. Today is where your book begins. The rest is still unwritten." Today, right now, in this very moment, is where your life begins. Right now, and everything that's yet to come is still unwritten. Do you know what that means? It means that whatever exists in your life today that doesn't fit who you are or isn't what you want for yourself, it's not permanent. It's not fixed. It's not your identity, and it is certainly not your destiny. It's simply the story so far. But you're the author. You're the author of your life, and it gets to be what you want it to be. So whether you want to let go of living in survival mode, a body that has forgotten how to relax, anxiety, overwhelm, self-sabotage, patterns that keep you stuck, coping and distracting behaviors like emotional eating, alcohol, scrolling, shopping, people-pleasing, overworking, a health struggle, or something you can't quite name, all of it is built on what has come before, but you don't have to take it forward. I want to share why, though, it can be so hard to believe that our lives could unfold differently, and why that difficulty, it's not a personal failure, it's a human condition. I realize that for many of you watching, what I'm saying might sound empowering, maybe even inspiring for some of you, but for probably most of us, it probably sounds like wishful thinking or impossibility. So let's start there. Why does it feel so difficult to accept that we are the authors of our lives and that we could heal and grow and create what we want most? The answer lies in the way our human brains work. Our brains are wired to use the past to predict the future, right? We look for patterns. We assume tomorrow will look the same as today. And one of the ways that we use the past to create our present is in our extraordinary ability to adapt. Every single one of us, without exception, has been adapting to our environment and our circumstances since the moment we were conceived. So for example, I live in Denver, which is 5,280 feet above sea level. The air's pretty thin up here. Now, those of us who live here, we've adapted physically by producing more red blood cells to carry oxygen more efficiently around the body. If you were to visit Denver, your body would immediately become busy making those additional red blood cells so that you could breathe a little easier. That's what our adaptations do for us. They help us breathe a little easier when they're created. But adaptation doesn't just happen in the body. It happens in our mind when we develop those adaptive thought patterns that become our adaptive belief systems. Things like, I have to be perfect to be enough. Or, if I make mistakes, I'm a failure. I have to take care of everyone else before I can take care of myself. It's my responsibility to make sure everyone else is happy. I have to make a certain amount of money, weigh a certain number of pounds, or look a certain way in order to have value. I can't show weakness. If I slow down, everything will fall apart. Adaptation also happens for us within our nervous systems when we develop patterns of hypervigilance, looking for the next threat, waiting for the next shoe to drop, anxiety, difficulty sleeping, being easily startled, or on the other side of things, shutting down emotionally, dissociation, feeling numb or disconnected, right? Checking out. Now, these adapted patterns, they shape how we see ourselves, how we see each other, and how we see the world. And that shapes how we think, how we feel, and how we act. Our adaptations influence who we trust, what we expect from relationships, how much risk we're willing to take, what's possible for us, how we respond to stress, and even what feels normal and familiar. What often feels like our personality is really our adaptations. It's not a stretch to say that our life is built on our adaptations. And since they are so central to the life we create, I'm going to share 6 essential things to understand about them. First of all, everyone has them, right? There isn't a single person that has not developed adaptations. I write about my own and the conditions that created them extensively throughout the book. Number 2, they are protective. Adaptations, they help you cope and function and stay as safe as possible in the moment when they're created, right? They help you breathe a little easier. Number 3, they make sense. In fact, we could even say they are brilliant strategies, even the ones that aren't helpful anymore or the ones you might label as self-destructive. They formed for a reason and they make sense. Number 4, they don't feel like adaptations. They feel like truth. You find ourselves saying things like, this is just who I am, or this is just how life is. Number 5, they shape the life you're living right now. Your relationships, your behaviors, your follow-through, your sense of peace, your sense of self, your success, even aspects of your physical health, all reflect the adaptations your system learned over time. And number 6, they often limit us because they were built from the past, right? They keep us oriented to the past. They make it feel like our lives are already written. Now, some adaptations do arise from clearly traumatic experiences, but others come from chronic stress, rigid environments, painful messaging, and they also happen in the context of everyday, ordinary circumstances of life as well. And I think it's important to name that in this context, when we're talking about trauma, what we're really talking about is anything that overwhelmed the nervous system of the individual at the time that the circumstance or event happened. So it's not for anyone else to decide what was overwhelming for you. What might be traumatic for me may not be for someone else. The label that we attach to something matters far less than the effect. It's more helpful to focus on the patterns that formed and how those patterns continue to show up in your life. So I want to take a second here and reflect on how this information might apply in your life. What adaptations might you be operating from, right? You can pause the video or you can write this question down and come back to it later. And if nothing comes to mind right away, that's common. Just look for the clues. Look for the places where you feel stuck or dissatisfied in life. Look for patterns that keep repeating. Look for situations that consistently drain you or hold you back. Wherever life doesn't feel right to you, there's an adaptation underneath it. Another 2 questions, actually, that I'm going to invite you to explore later are, number 1, what have your adaptations cost you? What have they cost you? Because they do cost. They cost energy, peace, health, connection, money, time, potential, the ability to find rest and ease, and especially your authenticity. And the final question is, what could be possible if you could think, feel, and act in a way that's more authentic rather than patterned? Naming your adaptations, how they have created your life circumstances or what they're costing you, and what could be possible without them is the next step in writing your next chapter. So I encourage you to spend a little time in the next few days with these questions. And now I'll share a couple of brief stories with you for context, so to illustrate how adaptations show up in real life. First, we'll look at Marie. She grew up in a home where abuse was present but never acknowledged. When she tried to speak out against what was happening for her, she was shamed, told she was exaggerating, being dramatic, causing trouble. And the message was clear. Her pain was not welcome, and her reality was not safe to name. At the same time, her mother was chronically ill, so she had to step into the role of caregiver long before she had the emotional or developmental capacity to do so. Marie did what we all do. She adapted. She learned how to anticipate needs, keep the peace, and handle crisis silently so as not to draw attention to herself. She learned to become fiercely self-reliant, to stop expecting comfort, protection, or understanding from anyone, including herself. She survived by shutting down her needs and her emotions, stuffing them down with food instead. And she stopped trusting her own instincts because acting on them had led to punishment or dismissal. So these adaptations that she made, they were brilliant. They helped her endure early life. And looking in from the outside, they made her seem capable, responsible, outwardly strong even. But inside, she was falling apart. She struggled to identify her own needs, and she moved through life shut down much of the time. She chose partners who didn't support her, and many of whom were abusive. She ignored her own exhaustion until her body said no more. Her life, built on adaptation, was painful. Now, her example involved harsh circumstances, what any of us looking in would recognize as traumatic. But as I said, adaptations also form in the common, everyday environments as well. Consider Carol. Carol grew up in a home that it looked fine from the outside. She had parents who were around and her basic needs were met. But her environment was full of rigid expectations and a strong emphasis on achievement. Praise was tied to performance, not who she was. And success, it didn't lead to rest or celebration. It just reset the bar. Mistakes were magnified. Effort was expected. And excellence was the minimum requirement. Carol adapted by becoming highly attuned, highly aware of standards, both external and then internal. She was constantly scanning for what was expected and how she could exceed it. Slowing down felt risky, and falling short felt catastrophic. No matter how much she accomplished, no matter how much she did, there was always a sense that she could have done more, should have done more, and in fact, needed to do more. From the outside, Carol looked successful. In fact, she looked like a superwoman. She achieved and produced and handled enormous responsibility. And on the inside, she was miserable. She was a ball of stress, using shopping, alcohol, scrolling, food to deal with the relentless pressure and a chronic sense of insufficiency. Marie learned to survive by shrinking. Carol learned to survive by striving. Both women learned adaptations that helped them navigate their environments. And both went on to build entire lives based on those adaptations, because adaptations don't update just because our conditions change. Once they become our operating system, they stick until we create the conditions to be able to adapt again. So I also want to plainly name that these examples happen to be women, but the work applies equally to men, to all humans. So if our lives are built on adaptations, many of which are no longer serving us, the question becomes, how do we adapt again towards wholeness, authenticity, potential, ease, so that we can live our lives as our true selves rather than our adapted selves? That's what I share in the book. And it starts with the fundamental understanding you're not the problem. You're adapted. Everything that isn't working in your life, it rests on adaptation, not weakness or failure. You're not weak. You're not a failure. But you won't get to where you're going through willpower or hustle like you've been taught. You already know that. To be able to adapt again, you need the right inner resources. You need 3 things. Number 1, safety, so your system is no longer stuck in survival mode. Capacity, so you have the space to hold change and the new life you're creating. And finally, energy. So you have the fuel to follow through in a sustainable way. And when those three things are in place, adaptation becomes not only possible, but it becomes natural, right? Because that's what we do as humans, adapt. We just need the right conditions to adapt in the ways that we want. And there's so much more that I could share here, but the three truths that I want you to make sure that you take from this video are: number one, you're not the problem. Number two, your life is not a finished story. And number three, you carry within you everything you need to write a powerful next chapter. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, take a little time with this one. Go back to the questions I posed for you, and then reach out in the comments to share how this information applies in your life and what questions you may have. I'll also mention that you can check out the free introduction to the book below in the video description. And as always, you can visit lorimontre.com for more support options. I'll see you soon.